guys, this is me making my bell sleeve off-shoulder shirt. I made this a while back, but this is how I did it. So the first thing I did was sweep the dirt off the floor. Why there was dirt on the ground, you can go and take your guess. But once I'd finished clearing my carpet of dirt, I laid out the fabric, and I know what you're thinking. Hey, this isn't the same fabric used in the intro shirt. Well, that's because this shirt is actually made for my cousin. These are the measurements I used for the top. Oh my gosh, exposed! But no, hopefully they don't see this. I cut the armbands, the torso band, and the bust band to approximately twice the circumference measurement, making sure to add a hem allowance. For the bell sleeve, I took the arm measurement and divided it by pi to get the diameter, which then became the new radius. Cutting a full circle piece out of the fabric. I then folded the circle in half and cut it in order to make 2 sleeves. Cutting away some of the excess so then it didn't bunch up at the armpit. I forgot a seam allowance, so I cut away some extra fabric and hoped for the best. And this is just a nice shot of all of the pieces all nicely cut out and laid on the ground. With the bust pieces and the torso pieces, I went and overlocked the sides of them. And whilst trying to overlock the sides of the fabric, one of the threads came loose. And if you have ever worked with an overlocker, you will know what I mean when I say it took half an hour to rethread. Throwing the fabric on the ground out of anger crumpled it. So I whipped out the iron, fed the beast, and banished those crumples to Neverland. With those pieces, I pinned one side down and then set up my machine, threading it up with a similar colored thread. I then sewed the pin side down, ironing the seams open and flat afterwards. I then took the torso piece, set my machine on the highest length thread, sewing 2 rows approximately a centimeter apart. Making sure not to backstitch at the front or the end. I then took a row of thread and tied them. It doesn't matter if it's the top or the bottom. And then took the row that wasn't tied and pulled it to ruffle the fabric. So the torso length matched with the bust length. Once they were at the same length, I spread the ruffles out. I then folded the fabric and marked where I wanted buttonholes. Using a buttonhole foot and the other mother's eye from Coraline, I did samples on a scrap piece of fabric before finally doing it on the actual shirt. I then used a seam ripper to go and tear open the holes, tidying it up with a tiny pair of scissors. Doing the same for the armbands. This is an irrelevant shot, but I actually caught my camera when I fell down, which is a big deal for a cut like me. I then pinned down and sewed the other side of the bust piece. To make the paper bag top of the shirt, I folded and sewed the elastic encasing about 2.5 centimeters from the top. I then realized that the stitching wasn't even with the pattern on top, so I had to undo all of the stitching and do it again. Then for the bust and the armbands, I folded the bottom of them and sewed to create an encasing. Then figured might as well sew the side of the torso piece as well. Then with the torso and the bust band, I fit and pinned them together, which took honestly longer than it should have. I then sewed them together, which went all for naught. Because I realized you could see the bottom row of the basting stitch. So I ripped all of those stitches out and sewed it again. After that whole debacle, I went and pinned the sides of the bell sleeve and sewed them together. I then pinned the armband to the bell sleeve and sewed them together. Flipping it right side out and top stitching the sleeve down. I then repeated the process for the second sleeve. I then pulled out the box of elastics and chose 2 different elastic sizes. Cutting 2 for the bust and 2 for each arm, 1 inch less than the initial measurement. With the elastics that were cut out, I went and used a safety pin to go and thread them through the encasings. Once the other side was out, I overlapped them and sewed them in a square pattern. This was how it looked like so far. With the arms now semi-assembled, I took it upon myself to go and put them on and dance like a maniac in my room for around 30 minutes. Not taking into consideration that these were way too small on me and were choking my arms. When the numbness of my arm had went away, I folded these strips and sewed them. After completing that, I used a safety pin, which the camera would not focus on, to turn the strips of fabric inside out. I then ironed them down flat, holding the iron very haphazardly for some reason in this shot. Using the safety pin again, which at this point I just gave up on the camera focusing on, to go and thread it into and through the buttonholes. Once it was through, I evened out the ends and tied it into a bow, snipping off the excess. I then used this tool, which, hey, stop poking that, to push the end of the rope inside. Or if you don't have this tool, using a toothpick would be fine. The results are basically the same. I then hand sewed the ends of the ropes shut. I then overlocked the remaining raw edges. Finishing the edges with the rolled hem, which is basically folding the fabric on itself and stitching it down so the overlocking wouldn't be seen. So it looked like this. I finished up by hand sewing the sleeves to the side seams of the main body piece. And that's how I made this top. if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching me and my shenanigans. Lots of love, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.